He was only 14 years old when they called him a murderer. A boy, not a man. A child who loved to sketch in the dirt with a stick, who ran barefoot through the fields, who dreamed of growing up to help his family. He didn't understand what was happening that day when the police came. He didn't understand why the town was whispering his name like a curse. He didn't know that in less than 3 months, he would become the youngest person to be executed in 20th century America. This is the truth they tried to hide. The year was 1944. The world was at war. But in a small, segregated town in South Carolina, another kind of war was being fought every single day. Black families lived under the heavy weight of Jim Crow. On one side of the railroad tracks stood the black community, living with fear and caution. On the other side, the white community, protected by the law that did not protect everyone equally. On a warm March day, 2 white girls, 11-year-old Betty June Binnicker and 8-year-old Mary Emma Thames, went out for a bike ride. They never came home. The next day, their bodies were discovered in a shallow ditch near the black neighborhood. The town erupted in fear, and fear quickly turned into blame. The real investigation never even began. Within hours, fingers pointed toward one name, George Stinney Jr., 14 years old. They came for him while his parents were away. He was alone with his little brother and sister when armed white officers entered the house. They told him he needed to come with them to answer a few questions. He didn't resist. How could he? He was a child. They took him away, leaving his siblings behind, terrified and confused. His parents were not allowed to see him again. In that cold, isolated room, they questioned him for hours. There was no lawyer, no guardian, no witness. He was surrounded by grown men who had already decided what they wanted to hear. They said he confessed, but there was no written statement, no evidence, just a word of the officers who wanted the case closed as quickly as it opened. The trial began weeks later. It lasted barely 2 hours. An all-white jury filled the courtroom. Outside, the air was tense. People gathered, their minds already made up. Inside, George sat small and silent. He didn't have a chance to defend himself. His court-appointed lawyer barely spoke. No witnesses were called for the defense. No evidence was presented that could prove him innocent. The prosecutor painted him as a monster. The jury deliberated for only 10 minutes. 10 minutes to decide a child's fate. The verdict was death. George was sent to the Columbia Correctional Institution, miles away from the only home he knew. He spent his final days alone, away from his family, away from any comfort. His parents weren't allowed to visit him before the execution. They could only send letters, which he never received in time. He wrote one of his last letters to his mother, promising that he didn't do it, that he was innocent, that he still hoped someone would save him. On June 16, 1944, they took him to the electric chair. He was so small that the straps didn't fit. They placed a Bible beneath him to lift his body high enough. He weighed less than 90 pounds. Witnesses said his face was hidden by the oversized mask. When the switch was pulled, the current was too strong for his small frame. The mask slipped off. Everyone in that room saw the boy they killed. And yet outside those walls, people celebrated, believing justice had been served. But it wasn't justice. It was racism in its purest, coldest form. For decades, the world forgot George Stinney. His story was buried beneath silence, lies, and history written by those in power. His family carried the pain quietly. His name was whispered, not spoken, but the truth has a way of resurfacing. Years later, civil rights activists, lawyers, and historians began to dig into the case. They found that no physical evidence ever tied George to crime. The confession was forced. Witness testimonies that could have proven his innocence were ignored, and the lawyer who was supposed to defend him did nothing. Slowly, the truth began to break through the walls that had held it captive. People began to speak his name again. His case became a symbol of everything wrong with a system built to punish people who were never meant to be protected by it. His family fought to clear his name, not because they thought it would bring him back, but because his memory deserved justice. 70 years later, in 2014, the state of South Carolina finally admitted the truth. A judge vacated his conviction. declaring that George Stinney Jr. had been denied a fair trial. His name was cleared. Officially, he was innocent, but the apology came far too late. George was gone, a child lost to the cruelty of a system that valued skin color over truth. George's story is not just a story of the past. It's a mirror reflecting the painful history of a country where racism turned children into criminals, where justice was one-sided, and where silence protected the guilty more than the innocent. He was a son, a brother, a boy who loved the world around him. In just 83 days, everything was taken from him. And he is not alone. There are many like him. Names buried, stories untold, lives lost in the shadows of injustice. For 70 years, they tried to keep his story quiet. But truth does not stay silent forever. Today, his name is spoken not in shame, but in strength. His story stands as a reminder what happens when fear, hate, and prejudice replace justice. It reminds us why we must never forget. This is not just George's story. It's the story of a nation still learning to face its truth. Do you believe justice was truly served? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to hear more untold stories they tried to hide.